Right, so the hotspot hypothesis, which explains the island of Hawaii, is that there are deep-seated plumes, we call them, that basically come from as deep as the Earth's core mantle boundary. So that's, almost 3,000 kilometers deep in the Earth, where the Earth turns from silicate mantle to molten iron core. There's a thermal discontinuity. It creates a plume, a rising, buoyant plume of hot material. And that material gets close to the surface of the Earth, it can create volcanoes. And Hawaii is sort of the world's best example in many regards of one of these hot spot-like plumes that's coming up from deep in the Earth, and it's poking right through the middle of a tectonic plate, which is the Pacific Plate, which forms most of the Pacific Ocean. And so as this material reaches the surface of the Earth, it melts and creates magma, which erupts as lava, which can pile up and create islands, including the world's largest mountain, which is the island of Hawaii. If you start at the bottom of the ocean, go to the top, the island of Hawaii is the largest mountain on Earth, and it's a giant pile of lava at the present tip of this hot spot that's coming up from deep in the Earth.
And historically, it is hypothesized, right, to have formed the whole chain of islands?
That's right. The plate moves relative to the hot spot, so you can actually see a whole train of islands which form the present Hawaiian Islands. And then below the surface of the ocean, you can see a much longer train of seamounts that are, submarine, that form, old islands that have eroded. And as the plate moves, the leading edge of the hot spot is at its eastern edge, and right now that's the island of Hawaii, and there's actually another volcanic center that's currently below the ocean further to the east called Loihi that's also erupting. So that's the tip of this chain of islands that's all been formed by this hotspot process.
And are the older islands still active?
Well, not particularly, although even Maui has had eruptions fairly recently. But once you get beyond Maui, things have been dormant for a long time, and that's why the islands get progressively more eroded as you go to the west. So you get to Kauai with all its spectacular cliffs and ridges. That's a heavily eroded version of, Hawaii today. Hawaii looks very young. It forms this large shield-like pile of lava, but eventually the plate will carry the present island of Hawaii to the west, and it will become eroded as well once volcanic activity ceases.
And what makes it a hypothesis?
Well, it's a hypothesis in the sense that the original hotspot model or hypothesis was that these things are pinned at particular points in the mantle. They rise coherently as cohesive plumes from top to bottom, and then they poke their way, through the surface of the plate tectonic system and make volcanoes. That real situation, not surprisingly, is more complex than that. Some plumes seem to be discontinuous. Some plumes are carried out of verticality by currents in the mantle over millions of years. So the real plume situation is complicated. It's looking with seismology. It's clear that it's not this simple thin plume of hot material coming up from the bottom of Earth's mantle. There's lots of complexity involved: geochemical complexity, dynamic complexity that controls which way it's going and how fast it's moving.
So the material that it's made of, that the magma is made of, also changes
the geochemistry of the deep Earth is rather complex, and the minerals change as you go to deeper pressure, so it's a complicated system. But the original idea that there are these deep-seated plume hotspots that come up all the way from the core mantle boundary to the surface seems to be validated now, approximately, by our best seismological and other measurements. And Hawaii is a good example of that. Iceland's another one. Iceland's a little more complex because it happens to come up through a plate boundary, the mid-Atlantic ridge, as opposed to Hawaii, which comes up right in the middle of a plate. So Hawaii is simpler in some respects.